Hello and welcome into another episode of the Father, Son, and the Holy Buckeye podcast. As always, I'm your host, Sean. With me is the father himself, Rob Simzak. Dad, how you feeling this week?
Almost as good as Kylian Mbappe is this evening. Pretty good.
Talking the France's 3-1 win today?
He had 2 goals and is now the all-time leading scorer in the history of the World Cup.
Oh, you're kidding.
Nope.
I must have missed that.
Yep.
Well, nice. Dropping the knowledge early today.
Dropping it early. People come here to get smarter. We got to keep our promises.
Well, we have a really fun episode ahead of us. Before we get into our topics, though, how about them Knicks?
Very happy. This is the one time I think I'm going to agree with my close personal friend, Dave Portnoy. I'm a lifelong Knicks fan. New York fans are not my favorite group of
I was gonna say this finals reminded me why, at a very young age, I decided to not be a New York fan. I think everyone forgot how miserable those fans really can be sometimes.
well, yeah,
They're like Philly fans replicated.
well, they can be worse. You are correct, and they have up until the last 3 years a pretty hideous owner. So, but yes, it's a great team, great win. With all due respect to Rich Silikowski, he's probably one of the few Knicks fans I can tolerate. I'm very happy for the Knicks.
And I didn't want to touch on the Knicks without making it known or reminding everyone that the Mavericks drafted Luka Doncic and Jalen Brunson in the same draft, decided they were sick of both of them, and got in exchange for Jalen Brunson and Doncic one first rounder, 29 games of Anthony Davis, and Max Christie. They fumbled drafting arguably two of the five best players in the league right now.
Knowledge drop number 2. There you go. Well done. Well played.
Well, beautiful. I wanted to kick off this episode by giving you a platform to get off of your chest everything that's gone down with Brendan Sorsby. But before we get into that, I thought it'd be appropriate, with the World Cup going on, and of course, whenever there's soccer and football going on in the same country, people are going to have that debate of, oh, you're calling it the wrong name. I wanted to give a little history lesson.
How's that, Sean? How did that go? You're calling it?
Yeah, you're calling it by the wrong sport.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify.
I wanted to give a little history lesson to our listeners about the origin of the term soccer and why exactly we have a sport called football that is so different from European football.
Let her rip. Knowledge drop number 3.
I want to take you back centuries ago to medieval England. They used to play a very violent, unstructured game generally known as mob football. And very few rules in this game, but the general objective was to get the ball from one end of the field to the other end of the field. And this game spread throughout Europe from the Middle Ages up through the 19th century. So now I'm going to take you to the mid-19th century, the 1850s. Universities in England wanted to codify the game and make standardized rules in order to make it safer and make it more organized. And in doing so, essentially two branches of football were born. There was association football, which was born in 1863. That was through the London Football Association, and that's essentially just soccer. And then there was rugby football, which became standardized in 1871, which, as you could guess, was just rugby. And during this time, people in England, they would shorten words by adding ER to the end of it. So instead of calling it association football and rugby football, association football was shortened to soccer. They took the SOC in association and named it soccer. And so that's where that term came from. But then as we got out of the 19th century into the 1900s, association football rules or soccer really won in popularity throughout Europe. So that's really how the delineation was born between soccer and rugby. And around the same time in the US, we also had a sport called football because that was also brought over by the Europeans that settled America. In 1869, Rutgers and Princeton played the first college football game. But that was essentially a soccer game. You weren't allowed to touch the ball with your hands. So around the same time, our football was by and large the same as European football. And around this time as well in the US, different colleges and universities were trying to standardize these football rules. And what ended up happening, Harvard went up to Montreal to play McGill University in a game of football in 1874. But McGill played the rugby version of football. And so Harvard saw this. They were like, this is so much sicker than our foot fairy shit. You're allowed to pick up the ball with your hands, lateral it, and tackle people. Let's start playing this. So Harvard came back to the U.S. with this new version of the game. They introduced it to Princeton, Rutgers, Cornell, all the schools that were forming this first collegiate league. And it took some time, but eventually the rugby football rules won out in the U.S. And so, again, our version of football started off as soccer. The late 1800s really became rugby. And that's when Walter Camp came in at the turn of the century and really created what we now know in America as football. And that's why he's oftentimes regarded as the father of American football, because he's the one that introduced the line of scrimmage, he introduced the system of downs, and he introduced the forward pass. So that's really how our version of football became so different from soccer. It has the same origins as soccer, that, just scrummy, lawless sport where you're bringing the ball from one end of the field to the other. But then that eventually became rugby because Americans like that style better. And then Walter Camp really created the sport of American football. And so then later in the 1900s, when Europeans were bringing over this soccer game and they called it football, Americans were like, well, we already have a sport called football and it's nothing like this. The Europeans were like, oh, well, we also have a term for it called soccer. So just a little knowledge drop to start your week. Soccer is actually a European term. And, our football and European football both have the same exact roots, came from the same place. We just kind of built our rules a little bit differently.
There you
So
go.
how about that?
How about it? How about it? I still like my both flavors of football.
But enough of that. Let's get into our actual American football topics. And like I said, to start, I want to talk about with the frenzy that's still going on in Lubbock, Texas. Since our last episode, Brendan Sorsby was granted an injunction by a Texas judge which stated that the NCAA or the Big 12 did not have jurisdiction to sanction him, and granted him the ability to play in 2026 after serving a 2-game suspension. Predictably, schools and fans across the country were really upset with this. Different schools and conferences even started discussing the possibility of boycotting Texas Tech across all sports. And the Oklahoma Attorney General went as far as publicly imploring the Big 12 to step in and sanction Texas Tech under their conference bylaws if the university was going to refuse to act. But then Texas Tech turned around and told the Big 12 that any sort of punishment or sanctions that they hand down, they're going to go ahead and take those to court too. Texas Tech even released a 21-minute video across all of their socials with Cody Campbell, who's their big booster, their AD, their president, and their coach Joey McGuire. Again, a 21-minute video, just rambling, talking in circles, defending their actions, claiming that they're only doing this to support Brendan Sorsby in his battle of addiction, and claiming their moral high ground, and really essentially saying that they were going to fight this to the bitter end. So going into this past weekend, Texas Tech seemed firm in its position that it was going to do anything to get Brendan Sorsby on the field in 2026. That was until Sunday, when the Big 12 announced that they would be taking this fight out of the Lubbock courts and into the U.S. District Courts. They filed a massive 47-page federal lawsuit against Texas Tech and the Attorney General. The Big 12 was essentially asking the courts to explicitly confirm that they did have the legal authority to enforce its own bylaws against a member institution like Texas Tech. And this was announced on Sunday. They didn't even get to officially file yet. They were just announcing their intent to. And less than 24 hours after that, wouldn't you know, Texas Tech and Brendan Sorsby parted ways. Texas Tech said they would still be paying his NIL agreement. And the university and Cody Campbell both came out with separate statements. And before I hand it over to you, I just had to read a couple of my favorite quotes from Cody Campbell's statement, because it is one of the most tone-deaf pieces of literature I've read in my entire life. Throughout it all, actually, let me say it with a nice little Texas accent. Throughout it all, Texas Tech acted with the utmost integrity in following NCAA protocols, provided complete transparency, and cooperated in every way possible. Another quote from that: the bottom line is that Texas Tech did absolutely nothing but act with integrity throughout the entire process. We broke no rules, no laws, and crossed no ethical lines. I don't think you and I need to talk about how crazy both of those statements are, but enough out of me. I summarized it, Dad. You've been simmering on this since our very first episode. So do you consider this a win that Brendan Sorsby is not playing, or are you still upset that Texas Tech seems to have not learned their lesson at all and is still standing on the high ground?
Well, before the announcements in the last 24, 36 hours, this episode was going to be devoted to Rob the Rage Machine and trying to wake America out of its moral slumber. I'm going to spare you my sermon and hellfire and spittle, dear listeners, but I am going to make a couple points that were going to be part of that hellfire and spittle. And I will start with we as sports fans, we have the NCAA we deserve. Okay. A lot's been said. I don't think anybody out there listening to this show, neither you nor I, are pro NCAA boosters. Its ability to affect change has gone from when I grew up watching football in the 70s. It was sort of this almost CIA, KGB like organization that knew everything. You didn't know anybody in the organization, but they were making all the decisions, pulling all the levers. They're not that anymore. We can trace the history of their decline back to the NCAA versus Oklahoma in 1984. But people have to remember a couple things here. The reason I say we get the NCAA we deserve is because it's a member organization. So Roger Goodell doesn't make decisions for the NFL. He consults with his owners and then makes a decision that the owners want him to make, whether that's negotiating a contract with the refs, with the players, TV contracts, what have you. Roger Goodell follows the owners. The same thing is true in the NCAA. They follow the presidents, who are their principal point of contact, and the athletic directors. And it's all member organizations of the NCAA, range from Division III to the big guys playing football in January on ESPN, from gymnastics and cross country to football. So it's all of those schools. It's a Byzantine organization with a lot of members and a lot of opinions. Every school in the NCAA that's like a power 4 or 5 school has been trying to diminish the power because they haven't liked the NCAA since that 1984 ruling. The real watershed, though, it's been sort of death by 1,000 paper cuts until a couple years ago with the O'Bannon ruling, where the Supreme Court voted 9-0, saying basically the NCAA's amateurism argument was silly. With so much money sloshing around, their argument didn't hold water. One of the few unanimous decisions in this court's history, given the current makeup of the court, 9-0. While I don't know much about the NCAA, I cannot believe that the NCAA, when talking this out with their membership schools, didn't bring up the idea, what if we lose? What's our backup plan? Should we settle? I can't believe those conversations were not had. I am reasonably sure that the member organizations told them, no, we are dying on this hill. Don't want to hear about a backup plan or what do we do if we lose or settlements. We are dying on the amateurism hill. We're going to win. They lost. And ever since then, you have people like Cody Campbell saying the system's broke, pushing legislation on Capitol Hill. And then you take it a little bit further with, I'm not going to do the Michigan cheating scandal here, but I wonder, after that ruling, did Harbaugh think we can get away with this, and if we get caught, we're just going to sue him because the NCAA is weak and feeble? Did that ever cross his mind? Poor Diego, 2 years at a JUCO, he needs an extra year. So what does he do? He gets an attorney in Nashville. Guess what? Oh, he gets a 6th year. Your boy Sean Trinidad Chambliss. Oh, I didn't take my medical red shirt on time. I want another year. That's like me missing the election on November 5th. And on December 5th, I tell the state of South Carolina, oh, I want to vote. And then you have the whole thing with Lane Kiffin last year leaving Oxford for Baton Rouge. Okay, I am citing 3 SEC schools. The SEC did nothing about that. So you've had a week in SEC, but where this stops, good listener, is the competitive integrity of the sport. And that's why this Sorsby not playing is so important. This sport was on the precipice of becoming WWE wrestling, where the outcome is preordained by someone, and we stopped watching because it's just not really a sport anymore. It's a spectacle. That's where we were headed. And there's a dangerous lesson here in Sorsby because some players out there are going to get the message that it's okay to gamble. It's okay to gamble. We'll just sue and I'll get my eligibility. And Sean, you will remember when we brought him up last year, I said he still has a snowball and he's still not quite in out last week. I thought there was a really good chance. I didn't want to sound like an idiot, but I thought didn't he was going to be ruled eligible. And I'm going to go one more spot and I'm going to sound like the guy, if you ever heard him speak in the painting American Gothic, or somebody who's in the teetotaler society, the temperance societies of the 1920s. I don't like gambling. And what we've done, the same people that have tried to weaken the NCAA have decided it's okay to take money from gambling. It's okay to advertise the line. Okay. It's okay for a while for athletes to even gamble on sports, just as long as it's not football. It's like inviting a vampire over for dinner. The vampire's told you how he likes to eat and drink. And then you're shocked when he goes crazy, eating and drinking the way he said he was. That's what gambling's doing. Let me connect the breadcrumbs for you, and Rob the Rage Machine will settle down. In the winter of this year, 25 and 26, there was a basketball scandal outside of the NBA and Chauncey Billups. I think it was 10 to 15 players were arrested by the NBA for fixing games, folks. One of the greatest basketball players most of you have never heard of, Connie Hawkins, got caught up in the same thing in the 1960s. It's happening today, and it almost happened with Sorsby. And what's shocking about that scandal with the basketball is how little money the mob and the professional gamblers had to offer these kids. Sean, it was amounts as low as $5,000 to fix a game. Okay.
That's correct.
It's crazy. This is bad. Something needs to be done because it between NIL and this gambling, and you can't even turn on ESPN before somebody's talking about their parlay or what the line is on the game. It's everywhere. Somebody needs to do something about it, or we're still sitting on the precipice of becoming world wrestling entertainment, a spectacle and not a sport.
Yeah, everything you said was spot on. And I think with the gambling stuff, I'm on board with you. Like I gamble a little bit on the side, nothing crazy, but how it's just become intertwined with both sports itself and like the media coverage of sports is just a whole Pandora's box. And I agree with everything you said about the NCAA as well. The only thing I'll push back on a little bit is that I don't know if Sorsby now not playing this year actually fixes anything. Because listen, my biggest problem was never really with Brendan Sorsby himself. At the end of the day, I think he's a kid that's doing whatever he could to get back on the football field. If I were in his shoes, I probably wouldn't have been gambling $90,000, but if I were in his shoes, I'd probably be doing the same thing just to get back on the field. If Brendan Sorsby ended up finding his way on the football field this year, it would have been sickening, but I would have learned to live with it. And, it's not like Texas Tech was going to win a national championship with or without Brendan Sorsby this year. It was really Texas Tech's response and how they've been conducting themselves and how the adults who are the people that are supposed to be the adults in the room are behaving.
Exactly.
That was really sickening to me
They're
because
yeah, let me
they keep hiding behind this claim that the only reason they're doing this, the only reason they're pushing to get Sorsby on the field is to help him with his addiction. And it's their moral obligation to get him on the football field in order to support him. And if that was actually how they felt during this whole thing, it would have been very easy for them to say, listen, we're going to keep him on the football team. He's going to travel with the team. He's going to practice with the team. He's going to have access to our facilities and all of our resources so he can get the help that he needs. We recognize that he has made mistakes and he needs to be held accountable for his prior transgressions. And for that reason, he is not going to be playing in any games this year. If their number one priority was actually his well-being, they could have done that, but it wasn't. And they kept hiding behind this facade that they were standing on this moral high ground, the only ones willing to help this kid. And as soon as the federal courts were brought into play, they went back in their turtle shell and, cast him off.
Well,
and so I with Brandon Sorsby not playing this year, I mean, it's
That
a great single win, but there's nothing has happened. No precedent has been set for this to not be
not be a big
for
issue
something like
going
this to
forward, not being a big issue.
exactly.
And I also think I wasn't going to make these points, but you brought up a couple ones. You know, that my biggest frustration with this, outside of the gambling, because that's the third rail, that's the Maginot line, that's just what you don't do. What troubled me about Texas Tech, and even Brendan Sorsby, is there were no adults in the room. This argument that he had an addiction and we're just standing by him, see, that's rubbish. Because I
No, and it's insulting to people that have actual mental problems and
No,
actual
he does.
addictions.
He does have. I do believe he has a problem. I do. But his problem, here's where it's rubbish. His addiction will only be just like Steve Sarkisian. He filed a wrongful termination suit against USC and said I was wrongfully terminated because I have this problem. And the arbitrator in that turned around and said, you'd have a claim if your employer knew about your problem prior to you going public with your problem. They didn't know. Same thing in Sorsby's case. He only copped to an addiction and went to go get rehab after the police are at his door with a friggin' warrant. That's where that loses water. And then the adults needed to be in the room for exactly what you said. Actions have consequences. How is Brendan Sorsby going to be a leader in a locker room when he hasn't learned that lesson? And frankly, Texas Tech, they're an innocuous team. I have friends that went to school there. I am sure it's a great school. Okay. I don't care about them. I mean, so what if Cody's buying everybody in the free world to go move to Lubbock? I don't care. Those are the rules. But what's going to happen? You lose your first game. Your first game. What is the head coach going to get asked? What's the offensive play caller going to get asked? What happens if they put a new wrinkle in the offense and it doesn't work? They're going to get asked, what was the fix in? Every game. Not only that, but if you play soccer, run cross country, play volleyball, play basketball, you were going to get asked about Brendan Sorsby. And not only that, you were going to be wearing the black hat on the black horse coming into town. It was going to be hell on every one of their sports teams.
And if Brandon Sorsby stepped foot on a football field this year, I have a hard time seeing him making it through the whole season
It
without
just
a couple cheap shots that were going to take him out of
Yeah,
the game.
it just wouldn't have, with all that pressure for him to be perfect when it's come out. Like we know, I didn't know this about Brendan Sorsby until all this stuff came out. His record the last two Novembers, 0-8. His numbers stink. Now, admittedly, playing for Cincinnati, competition got tougher. He doesn't have Jeremiah Smith, things like that. Get it. But he's 0-8 and the numbers weren't good. And so he does that again this year. It's just too much pressure. Why didn't he have a father? If you did this, I swear to God, I think if you were as good as him, I mean, you screwed up. You gambled. You shouldn't have done it. You knew you shouldn't have done it. If you had a problem, come to me. You know, you have two choices: supplemental, or you go in the draft in 27 and you sit this year out because you're done. There were no adults giving him that advice because this year he wouldn't be a first round draft pick.
Sure.
This is last thing, but if you're the president of Texas Tech and I get caught cheating on my physics exam and I get thrown out of school, I'm suing you. And on what ethical leg do you have to stand on? Because I'm going to say I have a disorder and this physics professor is just a jerk. I'm suing you. Well, and I'll get an injunction. I'll have that grade turned into an A. I mean, how are you teaching your kids anything of value if you stand by Sorsby?
It's crazy. My biggest takeaway from this, you touched on it earlier, I think just between the size of the rosters, how much all of these players command in, a salary and the revenue that college football generates compared to other sports. College football has just outgrown the NCAA, separate of all the other issues with the NCAA that you brought up, and it needs a third party to run this league. And it just seems like we are miles away from getting to that point. And until then, we're going to be running into more and more instances of like this, where we just hope that calmer heads prevail like they did here. But I don't think that the larger problem is really solved with Sorsby not playing this year. And I'm afraid that we're going to have a lot more instances similar to this in the years to come until we find a solution or a replacement for the NCAA to really moderate college football and bring some standardization to the sport.
Barrett is Whizzer White when you need him.
Mr. White, God, I wish I knew.
Let's move on. Let's
But
move on.
that's yeah, I think enough Texas Tech. We're gonna move off of that, but I wanted to talk some quarterback battles going on. I think a old-fashioned quarterback battle is something that's kind of getting lost in college football because we're seeing more and more when teams have a quarterback to replace, they go into the portal, get a proven starter, and there's not that many homegrown battles going on anymore. But there are four I wanted to touch on briefly. We're going to go outside the Big Ten to start. But Alabama, Kalen DeBoer is going to have his first hand-picked quarterback because remember, Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson were both Saban recruits. It's going to be a battle between Keelan Russell, who is a five-star quarterback in last year's class, and Austin Mack, who is also a five-star. He's entering his fourth year after transferring from Washington in 2023. Was doing some reading on this battle, and everything that I've been seeing indicates that Keelan Russell has the early lead in the clubhouse. Austin Mack has been dinged up for a lot of the season, and Keelan Russell has really been shining. And it's just really interesting with Alabama. Public discourse around them and the expectations going into this year are objectively the lowest they've been since Saban took over. And I think people are seeing, two quarterbacks battling out that have never started a college football game and are going to assume that that means Alabama is completely out of it already. But I'm kind of in the opposite boat. I think of Jalen Milroe, and he's amazing talent. He was never suited for Kalen DeBoer's offense because what does he like to do? He likes his quarterback to sit in the pocket and just deliver piss missiles down the field, like throwing 50-yard ropes every other play. Jalen Milroe was never that kind of quarterback. Ty Simpson was. I don't think he had quite the arm strength that Kalen DeBoer likes, but also he wasn't the athlete that could kind of get out of the pocket and extend plays like he needed to with that horrible offensive line. This year, the offensive line, I think, should be better. And Keelan Russell, from everything I'm reading, is essentially who Bryce Underwood thinks he is. He can do the exciting off-script plays. He is a phenomenal athlete with his legs, but more importantly, he can stand in the pocket and deliver consistent, accurate balls downfield, and I think that's what really shined in the spring game. So if Keelan Russell ends up winning this battle and plays as well as the hype has been around this offseason, I think that Alabama's quarterback position could actually be an improvement from last year, and we could finally start to see the Kalen DeBoer offense. But what I wanted to ask you, Dad, is where is the bar for Alabama now? Because they could have a significant improvement in quarterback play and still lose in the first round of the college football playoff because they were a long way off from being in Ohio State or Indiana's or Miami's kind of field last year with the way they played on the line of scrimmage. So where is the bar for Alabama now? What do they need to do this year in order to keep Kalen DeBoer's seat cool, at least for another year? Because it seems like every other week Alabama fans are calling for his job.
Well, if there's one fan base that's screwier than Ohio State's, it's Alabama's. But that doesn't make his seat less hot. What I would say is the sport changed. And Nick Saban wasn't going to be winning national championships on a regular basis, and he knew it. Now, would he still be making the playoffs if he was still there? I have no doubt. The guy's the best coach in the history of the sport. Would he figure out a way forward if he was a younger man? Yeah, hell yeah. Would Alabama still be great? Yeah. But they're not winning 5 or 6 national championships like Saban did. They're not, because you can't just stockpile 5-star class after 5-star class after 5-star class because those kids couldn't go anywhere without sitting out a year. That model changed and Saban knew it. So Kalen DeBoer can coach. Anybody who doesn't think that is foolish. I think you asked about the ceiling. If he doesn't make the playoff, I don't think he gets fired unless it's just a complete fail.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think he gets fired. I don't.
Really? Because I'm almost in the boat. I feel like if they don't make it at least to the second round of the playoffs, like even if they make the playoff and they're bounced in the first round, I have a hard time seeing him stick around.
I understand why you say that. If it's another, now remember, they got trucked by Indiana. I walked up to two at a taco bar in downtown St. Pete, and there was a guy with his girlfriend, probably about your age, maybe a little bit older, wearing Indiana gear. and they looked a little nervous. I put my arms around them and I said, 5 touchdowns. You got this by 5 touchdowns. And I was close, but I was so confident that game's not even going to be a game. It'll be over by the kickoff. And it was pretty much. So if that happens again, yeah, he's done. If they lose a competitive game, I don't think he's fired. I don't, because I think Alabama probably, like, first of all, who are they getting that's better? I mean, Saban's not coming back. Why would Ryan Day or Kirby Smart go there? Who are they going to get that's better? The
Well,
sport.
see, I don't know if they'll think that far because I agree with you that I still think Kalen DeBoer is one of the 10 best coaches in college football and he can coach anywhere. And I also agree that even Saban wouldn't be reeling off a national championship every other season in these current conditions. And I'm just nervous for DeBoer that Alabama fans are going to come to that realization on their next coach after him. I feel like, he'll fall short. Let's say he loses in the first round and they fire him and they bring in someone else. I feel like it'll take that coach for them to realize, oh, we're a different program now. This is a different sport. We can't expect our new coach to win a national championship. So that's my fear for them. And that's why I wanted to ask you about kind of what the standards are in Tuscaloosa now, because I feel like the reality versus how fans are holding the standards are very far apart.
I'd agree. I think they'd make the playoff. I don't think he gets fired unless they just get destroyed in the first round. If they lose 4 games this year, I think he's probably done.
Yeah. Oh, for certain. For certain. Well, let's take a stop to another SEC school where Florida has an unexpected quarterback battle going on. So they brought in head coach John Sumrall and offensive coordinator Buster Faulkner in from Georgia Tech, and they brought with them their backup quarterback from the past 2 years in Aaron Philo, who has been Haynes King primary backup. And with the way that Haynes King played, Aaron Philo had a decent amount of experience coming in for injury. He even led them to a win over NC State in 2024. And the expectation by most Florida fans was that Aaron Philo was going to come in and win the starting job fairly early. But from what I've been reading, there's a lot of buzz around this true freshman Tramel Jones Jr., really turning this battle into a neck and neck race. Aaron Philo threw a couple bad picks in the spring game where Tramel really kind of opened up some eyes. And honestly, if a true freshman was pushing my veteran quarterback, I was expecting to be the starter. If I were a Florida fan, I'd be a little nervous about what that means because I feel like it's likelier that they're going to have maybe questionable quarterback play than this true freshman Tramel Jones is going to come in and light up the college football world. But what this got me thinking of is that really the past 15 years since Urban Meyer left, Florida football feels like one giant deja vu. They bring in a coach that usually has some initial success and then they fall flat on their face. Since Urban left after the 2010 season, Florida actually has more losing seasons, 6, than 10 plus win seasons, 3. In the last 15 years, they are 110 and 79. That's a 58% win percentage, meaning they are averaging a 7-5 regular season over the past decade and a half. They are now on their 5th head coach since Urban left. Each of the past 4 head coaches have failed to make it more than 4 seasons, and each of them have had at least one losing season. And since 2011, they are 43rd in the country in win percentage, 8th in the SEC. Some teams that have a better win percentage than Florida since 2011 includes Missouri, Ohio University, Kansas State, Iowa, and even Oklahoma State, who has won 4 games total the past 2 years. So I think it's time we start having an uncomfortable conversation about what Florida football really is. Because, again, I got into college football in 2006, so I remember their first that national championship. I remember 2008 very well. I think that 2008 Florida team is one of the best teams of the 21st century. But if you're born 5 years after me, you don't really remember those 2 titles. And we just established over the past 15 years, Florida has been an aggressively average team. So I want to ask you, Dad, because you have more historical context. What was Florida before those 2 national championships? And is what we've seen out of Florida the past 15 years a better description of the program than, maybe what they were during that Urban Meyer area?
I'll say this. You present a lot of compelling data. Florida has caught lightning in a bottle with 2 extraordinary coaches. And that is the extent of their national championship success. One's the old ball coach and Steve Spurrier, and one is Urban Meyer. I mean, Dan Mullen was not a bad coach. People,
He was the most successful coach they've had since Urban Meyer by a mile.
he's won 70% of his games. But people got tired of the fact that he was, he wasn't recruiting that well, right? He was losing recruits to Alabama and Georgia. He was a good coach, but this is the same school that hired Ron Zook, that hired Charlie Strong, that hired Will Muschamp. So I think go back to episode 1 of our podcast where I said to you about the coaching changes we discussed then. I think a lot of these ADs have the proverbial list in their back pocket. And it's a list of coaches to call if your coach should leave, get fired, get embroiled in some kind of craziness where you need to cut bait and let them loose, right? And they just bring in somebody on that list. What they don't do, and this is true a lot in business as well as college football, they don't take a step back and say, what happened? Why didn't Dan Mullen work? They have a reason in their head, but they didn't look at their systems and, why didn't Dan Mullen work? Why are we so fed up with him? Why do we have to go get Billy Napier? And how is John Summerall going to be different than Billy Napier? I don't know if that's happened at Florida. I don't think it happens a lot at a lot of schools. It's why Michigan has frankly struggled with some of their coaching hires. I think they just pick somebody off the list and preferably a Michigan man. Ohio State's gotten lucky. They've done it really well. I think some of that's blind luck. Urban Meyer's sitting there unemployed. What are you going to do? You're going to renew Luke Fickell or are you going to hire Urban Meyer? You're hiring Urban Meyer. So that's what I think Florida really is, what you just said. They're in a state. I mean, you have Florida State, you have Miami, you have them, you have UCF, you have South Florida, you have Florida Atlantic, right? They're in a state where, yep, lot of talent in Florida, probably the most football talent of any state in the country. But
Heavily recruited state. Yeah.
yes, exactly. Every single school in the country recruits that state.
And
Every
I think it's alarming that Florida struggled so much during the 2010s, where for a majority of it, like Miami's been in the doghouse since the 90s. Florida State, after Jameis Winston left, went down the shithole. Like they had an opportunity after Urban Meyer left to kind of take a stranglehold on the state of Florida, and they failed to do it.
Yeah, and yeah, they hired Will Muschamp. I remember before Spurrier went to Florida, he coached Duke. At the time, if Duke, Northwestern, and Indiana had a round robin, and they didn't play anybody else, Duke wouldn't win a game. And we're talking about a Northwestern team that somewhere in there had like a 30-game losing streak, right? Indiana was never any good. So that's how bad Duke was. And when they lost Spurrier and they had a series of coaches that came along and can never replicate Spurrier's success, Krzyzewski effectively said the same thing about the football program. We need to take a step back and stop hiring coaches and understand what we can do better to support our coaches. And why didn't these coaches work out in the first place? Because we thought they were good enough to hire and they turn out to be abject failures. I mean, then why did we hire them? So I think that's every athletic department's challenge. Again, also, do they have a general manager? Because if the coach doesn't have a strong GM where they can work together to identify talent in the portal and in recruiting, you are not going to be good. I don't know if Billy Napier had that.
Or if the head coach can essentially be the GM and,
And not
allocate the offensive and defensive strategy to a good offensive coordinator and a good defensive coordinator.
correct,
That's
correct.
also a
You've
possibility.
got to be able to identify the talent, though, and you need a GM to do that. Urban Meyer and Spur are the exceptions of Florida. That's statistically proven.
Yeah, outside of those two coaches, they're an 8-4 team. Really? Right?
Yeah, they are. I mean, they did have like early to mid '80s. They had a little spasm with Emmett Smith and a few other players.
I like the point you made about just picking someone off of the list, essentially. It's almost like you're letting someone else make your hiring decision for you because the industry kind of determines who the hot coaches are and who are the splash hires that are gonna,
Right.
have a big impact this season. And, the industry is wrong about a lot of things. And then, like you said with Ohio State, like Ryan Day was not on the top of the list for any head coaching hires in college football. Jim Tressel was not at the top of anyone's list. And Ohio State did what was best for Ohio State and didn't listen to the outside noise. And I think you're right. It's exactly where Florida keeps stumbling is they make who the industry thinks is going to be the right hire instead of evaluating why have all these coaching decisions gone wrong.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Um, yeah, so I think maybe it's about time Florida fans start dreaming about, a national championship and start dreaming about, I don't know, the Pop Tarts Bowl. But I want to jump over
Don't be
to,
mean. Don't be mean.
okay, I want to jump over to the Big Ten where I think really we only have two real quarterback battles going on because, like I said, a lot of guys, they're either returning starters or guys went into the portal and got their starter. And I want to start in Rutgers. You and I have talked a couple times about Dylan Lonergan, the transfer veteran quarterback from BC. The expectation was that he was going to come in and kind of win this starting job, but a new player has entered the conversation, AJ Serace. He is a New Jersey native. He's putting together an incredibly efficient spring. He's refusing to yield first team reps. And so I've never heard of AJ Serace. I did a little background research on him. He went to high school at Notre Dame in Trenton, New Jersey. He was a two-time captain in high school. His senior year in 2023, he won Player of the Year in New Jersey, led his team to an undefeated regular season and a playoff appearance. He completed over 78% of his passes for 25 touchdowns, ran for almost 1,000 yards and 15 touchdowns. His only experience at Rutgers so far is going 4 for 7 for 58 yards and 2 touchdowns versus Norfolk State in week 2 last year. But all reports out of Piscataway are that AJ Serace is pushing the veteran Lonergan, and that quarterback race is up in the air. And listen, I'm all for a New Jersey kid making some noise and maybe even being the one to put Rutgers back on the map. We already talked about it last week that Rutgers has a really favorable schedule. They have 8 winnable games. Again, for Rutgers, that might mean they go 4-4 in those games. But if they take care of those 8 games and they manage to beat either USC, Michigan, or Penn State, which again, they'll be significant underdogs in, but I do think if things roll right, if Rutgers is a little bit better than we think, I do think those are winnable. I'm assuming that their road trip to Indiana is going to be an automatic loss, but if they take care of those 8 winnable games, pull off one of those 3 upsets, that's a 9-3 team. They're going to be ranked in November. I could see if they build some momentum this season, get to a point where they can retain some of the best talent in New Jersey, which is a very underrated state for high school talent. If they can get a couple game-changing transfers every season, and they can get some consistency at quarterback, which they could be getting in AJ Serace. If he wins the starter, he's a potential 3-year starter they have in their room right now. I could envision a world where Rutgers makes a run of the college football playoff within the next 5 years. We're in a world where Indiana won a national championship, where Vanderbilt was 2 spots away from making the college football playoff. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, but I want to ask you, as someone who's spent a lot of his life in New Jersey, how far do you think this program can rise?
Well, they have the coach right. Shiano's one of the most underrated coaches in football. He's at a tough place to win. The issue at Rutgers has always been money. It's always been money. Can they be a playoff team? I do think Shiano had some conversations this year with the administration where it's like, look, we need to get our NIL right. We do. And I think they're getting it right. If he can, AJ may stay, but if he has a blowout year at Rutgers this year, he may go, right? That's what we've learned.
All about the money.
Yep, it's all about the money. So, um, there's no guarantees, but they got the coach right. I'd like to see them settle in first, go 7-5, go 8-4, and let Shiano build his culture, try and keep those kids. And yeah, can they get lightning in a bottle and make the playoff like once every 5 years? Yes, because Shiano's that good a coach. No doubt about it.
It is kind of a sad state of affairs that, like, someone like Rutgers, they can do everything right. Let's say AJ Cerise is the next Tom Brady for whatever reason. They have the coach, they can do everything right, but if they don't have the donors, if they don't have the boosters, they could lose it all. So it really does all come down to money. But
Yep,
who knows? Maybe an 8-4 season this year would be everything that every Rutgers graduate would need to start writing over some checks because again, they get some momentum, then they get the money, and then anything is possible. You've seen that with Indiana.
I agree.
All right. Well, the last quarterback duel I want to talk about is at Iowa, where they also have a dead even, old
Wait,
fashioned quarterback duel.
wait. Quarterbacks in Iowa? Is that
They do still have the
what?
forward pass.
No. I
It's uh
what am I?
it's an old school battle between last year's backups, Jeremy Hiklinski and Hank Brown. Again, just two riveting white names there. But they do seem to be very opposite quarterbacks. Hank Brown seems to be kind of the prototypical quarterback. He's got, he's 6'4, 215, brings solid arm strength, relatively risk averse, a traditional drop back style guy. And Jeremy Hiklinski, he's a lot smaller, 5'11, 188. He's more mobile, kind of the playmaker. What I saw him described as a fearless risk taker who excels at improvising, throwing on the run, and creating explosive downfield plays. That was from an article, some Rutgers article
He's
I
got
read,
moxie. He's got
or
moxie. That was
Iowa.
code. That was code for he has moxie.
Yeah, yeah, there it is. Exactly, like a Matt McGloin, I
Yes,
guess.
exactly.
Um,
Exactly. The captain of moxie, the magician of moxie, Matt McGloin.
yeah, I mean, so honestly, I don't know how much this quarterback battle really matters because Iowa, they probably won't even pass for 2,000 yards on the season. And in a way, I do respect Kirk Ferentz's consistent approach. Iowa fans are not ones to be beating their chest saying, why aren't we in the playoff? Get us to 10 wins." And he's keeping them relevant through all of the roller coasters we've seen in college football. They were ranked last year, so you got to give it a little bit of respect to Kirk Ferentz because, again, like I hats off to him for being able to win 7, 8, 9 wins at Iowa, given everything that's going on in college football. But he's getting up there in age, and he can't do this much longer. And I just personally have a hard time seeing Iowa not go down the same path as Wisconsin has. The past 5 years or so.
I think Iowa's done a good job of hiring coaches too. In their big sports. I think they have. I think they'd like to have their wrestling coach back and not have him coaching at Happy Valley, but that's for a different podcast. I feel you. What you said about Friends, I do have an immense amount of respect for him. He puts guys in the league on Sundays. But if I was an Iowa fan, I think I don't know if I'd have a forehead left. I think I would have banged it right off my skull because it's just every year the same. You just need a quarterback that can complete over 50% of their passes. You need a couple wide receivers that can win in the occasional one-on-one battle. And our defense will take us to 9-3. And some of these teams the last 5 years with a competent quarterback would have been in the playoff. I mean, shoot. Last year against Oregon, they're right there. So I don't know. I mean, he is getting up there. He's the all-time leader in Big Ten wins. I think he's probably got a couple more years left. And then there's no real reason for Iowa to keep him around. I mean, he's not like Bobby Bowden or Joe Paterno, where he built this program. He inherited it from Hayden Fry, and he's done good with it.
Yeah, probably another 8-4 season loading, most likely. And yeah, I mean, I guess my only concern is be how he hands off the program. But again, I think maybe I'm not giving them as the program as much credit as I need to
I
be.
don't think his
Um,
son is going to be named coach, so we don't have to worry about that, right?
yeah,
So
God, I hope not.
I think you can find a coach in the Midwest. I mean, they did it in basketball. And they've done it a couple times with their basketball team. They'll find somebody that can at least get them 8-4.
But I think that's enough talking about some other schools. I had a recruiting updates for Ohio State. I had some basketball news come out. Five-star guard LJ Smith reclassified to the 2026 class, so he will be joining the Basket Bucks this season. He's joining a loaded recruiting class led by forward Anthony Thompson, who's actually the fourth highest rated prospect Ohio State's ever signed. If I remember right, I think it was Greg Oden, Mike Conley, and D'Angelo Russell, who were the three that were higher ranked than him. But LJ Smith, the guard that reclassified, he's going to be our 8th new player across our incoming high school class and our transfers for the 2027 season. And also remember that John Mobley withdrew from the NBA draft, so he's going to be back for next season. I think we have a lot of guys who can handle the ball and score in the backcourt. And our front court returns Amari Bynum, who flashed at the end of last season, was an absolute animal in our last few games. I just think I'm excited. For the first time since Thad Matta left, I'm like genuinely excited for this team. I think we're going to be a preseason top 25 team. I think we have way more depth than the past couple seasons. And I think if we don't manage to win at least one NCAA tournament game this year, I might have to go to Columbus and take care of business myself if Diebler keeps his job, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. That's all the main topics I had. Before we get into the post-game spread, last week I shared my list of my top 5 non-Ohio State players, or my top 5 favorite non-Ohio State players. Wanted to give you an opportunity to share yours.
There's somebody on this list that I think is going to shock everyone. I mean, I know will shock people.
Oh, I know exactly who you're going to say.
You think?
So when you get there, let me guess.
All right. And I thought I was going to start with Abradaris. That was who I was going to say. And I'm like, well, I mean, he was good. He scared me. And I thought about, well, what about OSU transfers that had some success somewhere else? And I said, well, that's kind of cheating. Like I could have thrown Joe Burrow on this list and it wouldn't have, not doing it. So I didn't do that. So number 5 is the name that I think most people will be shocked at. You want to take a guess? I think by ruling out
Devin Gardner. Devin Gardner at Michigan.
That you know what? He probably would have been 6, but you're close.
Wow.
You're close.
It's okay.
Charles Woodson.
Get the fuck out of here. I'm gonna have to bleep that out. I'm disgusted.
Come on. He's kind of like, if you're a Red Sox fan, I don't see how you could hate Jeter. I mean, you could maybe hate him, but you have to acknowledge his greatness, and he just did everything right. But just if for no other reason, go back and look at his interception against Michigan State. It's still probably one of the top 5 catches in the history of college football. How he caught that ball is just crazy. I'm not saying I liked him. I respected him. I hated him when he got into it with David Boston. I hated that punt return. I hate it. Okay? But to me, he was just so good.
I didn't listen to a word you said. I had to run to the bathroom to go puke.
Well, fair. I hope you're all right. So, sorry.
Next player.
Chris Borland, Wisconsin linebacker. Guy was a demon. These two players I can't understand why Ohio State didn't recruit him. And then eventually Urban Meyer like, oh, could have had a V8. I guess we should have recruited Chris Borland. Yeah, you think?
That was a good poll. He was a monster.
Yeah, Chris Borland number 4, and then Antoine Winfield Jr. number 3. I was so
angry. Kills me that he's not a Buckeye.
Kills you, right? And he was fantastic at Minnesota. And then he goes down and wins the Super Bowl with Tampa Bay. He is a freaking stud. His father is one of the best 5 cornerbacks to ever play the game, let alone maybe the best Ohio State cornerback of all time. And you let him walk. You didn't even offer him. Mistake. He's my number 3.
Yeah. Well, you got 3 defensive players to start.
Yeah, pretty interesting because they don't get enough love. Number 2 is going to be Tim Tebow. Again, not
that's okay.
I mean, he is the collegiate Derek Jeter. He took that one hit one year against Kentucky, and I thought he was dead. And Tebow just gets right up. I didn't even want to look because I thought he was literally showing. I thought he was dead. And he gets
up. I mean that speech he had in 2008 after they lost to, I think it was Ole Miss. That iconic speech, you will never see another player push his team as hard as I will push my team every single day. Like, I don't care if you're a Florida State fan. It's hard to listen to that and not get goosebumps.
Yep. I will say one funny thing that Ken Torrance said the year Michigan beat Florida in whatever silly Citrus Bowl.
Tebow's Heisman year.
Yeah, and they beat him in that bowl game. And somebody was given Ken's neighbor time was giving him grief about Ohio State, and Ken's looked at them and said, "Oh, I didn't even know Ohio State played today. I was too busy watching the Florida game."
That's funny.
The greatest way to shut people up. And then my number one is Saquon. Just a great guy. And
Yeah.
he's from right across the river from us where you were raised in Hunterdon County. He's from Easton. So I also have a soft spot in my heart for him, for being kind of a quasi local boy.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Hard to hate Saquon. Um, but I think that'll do it today. I think we could put a bow on this, get into the post-game spread where we each share something we're eating, drinking, watching, reading, or just enjoying that we want to share with each other and our listeners.
I have two things real quick. I'm going to give a quick recipe. It's a Venetian pasta that I got geeking out on one of my PBS cooking shows. Get some cherry or grape tomatoes, probably 2 pints. You season those with olive oil, salt, and garlic. Put them on a baking tray lined with foil. Put your oven on, broil, put them in there. The pasta water, you want a very starchy water. So it's just enough to cover the pasta. Heat some olive oil in a skillet. Have two, four, six, however much you like garlic, whole cloves of garlic. You put them in the oil when the oil gets up to temperature and you brown them. Should take 3 to 5 minutes to do that. And you want a little bit more than golden brown. You're 7 minutes in. The tomatoes might be slightly charred and all have popped. You pull those out of the oven. Your pasta water may be boiling. You can throw in your pasta. To the olive oil in the skillet, you add a chopped tomato and you let it kind of get soft. You're not looking to turn it brown, just soft, somewhere between 5 and 8 minutes. You add somewhere between 3 and 6 anchovy fillets. Now, I know a lot of people, including you, may turn up your nose and be like, anchovies, hate them. And for the first like 10 seconds you put them in, you're going to be, yep, there's why I hate them. It's that smell. But the anchovies will disintegrate in that tomato and they add this umami flavor that's really nice. And you add some chili flake to that. Add your tomatoes, save 2 cups of the pasta water, drain your pasta, let the tomatoes cook with the oil and the chili flake and the anchovy. When you rub a spoon through the middle of that mixture and that lane that you created through the middle of it stays a lane, it's ready. Dump the pasta in. I did use the 2 cups of cooking water. Normally, I don't use as much as some recipes call for, but I thought this added to it. Let the pasta finish for a couple minutes in that saucy broth. Serve it up, plate it up, add some locatelli. And folks, if you're using the stuff in like the can that I used in the 70s, come on. This is 2026. Buy some locatelli cheese, grate it on your pasta. You'll thank me later. Okay? That is a great dish. And since we talked Texas Tech, I am going with another movie. It's a movie that I think you know, Sean. It's called Vengeance. It's written and directed by the temp from The Office, BJ Novak. It is not kind of, it is a dark comedy. It's ostensibly about a dude doing a podcast and the intersection of, the opioid crisis figures heavily in it. The first hour I is really funny, and football fans should watch it because it's got a great Texas Tech Texas scene at a rodeo. It's a really well written piece with kind of a dark ending, that turns uplifting at the end, but it mixes geography, the politics of our country, rural versus urban dynamics, grief, love, self-centeredness, and overcoming that. And it's a good movie.
Interesting. Cool. Well, I'll have to check it out. Appreciate you sharing that. I wanted to talk about with you. I made pesto for the first time last week. I don't know why. I've never attempted at doing it. And I wanted to share how I made it with you because there's a few things you make that I think belong in Michelin star restaurants. But one of my favorite things you make is pesto, mainly because it's so unique. I've never had a pesto that tastes quite like yours. So I wanted to share with you what I put in mine because it was good. I definitely wasn't disappointed with how it turned out. It was definitely missing a little bit of something, and I just don't know what it is. I did about 2 cups of fresh basil, And I know you're supposed to put nuts of sorts in there. And I had these rosemary almonds, like kind of what you would have with like charcuterie. So I use those because they're delicious and they're buttery. I put a half a cup of those in there. About quarter cup of lemon juice. I put in 4 big garlic cloves, like a quarter cup of olive oil, just a smattering of Parmesan cheese and salt and pepper. And then when I put it through the processor, it ended up a little bit thicker than I wanted, so I added a splash of bone broth to liquefy it a little bit.
Olive
But that's what I put in there.
olive oil.
I put a quarter
Okay.
cup of olive oil.
You got to go down. All right. Well, then you just add more olive oil. I think you can loosen it up with olive oil. You can get, and that's what I would use because it's going to give you more taste. But the bone broth may have worked out, and that's perfectly fine. If you
No,
like,
I was hesitant to put more olive oil in because
no.
I saw a quarter cup go in and I was like, ooh,
And then
I don't know if
don't
I'm
then you also a couple things. You have to remember you can always add spinach or um or any green vegetables.
do you put jalapenos in yours
You
ever?
could you I've thought about that. I've thought about it.
I could have yours is sometimes a little spicy.
Anything you said I don't think is wrong. You have
Got to
to
play around with it a
you got
little
to
bit
play
more.
around with it, and you can make it healthier by getting spit.
No, I don't care
All
about
right,
that.
all right. Well, there you go. At my advanced age, I do care about it. So it sounds like it was good. I wish I was there to share it with you.
November we can. But cool. I think that'll just about do it. Any parting words before we call it an episode?
People, use your turn signals and be nice to each other. That's it.
That more so turn signals. But enough about that. This has been the Father, Son, and Holy Buckeye podcast. I'm your host, Sean. With me, as always, was the Father himself, Rob Simzak. Dad, I think this was a good episode, and I'll catch you. I have a wedding this weekend, so I won't be around, but I think we'll catch you maybe the following weekend for our 6th episode.
Yep. Be safe, my friend.
You too. I hope everyone has a good rest of your week.